Okay. All right. All right. I'm just going to start every podcast from now on messing my words up just so that there is no confusion whatsoever. I can't talk. There we go. That one was a bit more organic. Yeah, now you all know how I am in real life. That's great. But no, that's good though. It's good to be you know, clear with everything. So anyways, after that intro, thank you all for watching the last one. If you did, if you didn't, then I'm not thanking you. Well, because you need to go watch it. Boy, this just keeps getting more awkward by the second. Anyways, we're back with the second episode of my horror movie podcast, and today, of course, I'm talking about the sequel to the first Nightmare on Elm Street, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. That's kind of a goofy title, if I'm being quite honest. I never like those. But anyways, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. Or 2. I've seen it called Part 2, but it's officially A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. So, well, first, before we get into it, I want to talk a little bit about some, like, kind of housekeeping kind of stuff, just because I want to. I did see some people watch my last one, which is great. I mean, it's awesome, and it's good to hear your thoughts and everything. It's only been like a day or two since I put it up, but I super appreciate everybody watching. It's really great to share these thoughts with you and hear your thoughts, and that's why I do it. I always have technical issues when it comes to things like this. I think I'm pretty technologically savvy, but I still have the issues. So last year, like I said, my problem was with SoundCloud was an upload limit. And this isn't a very high-tech podcast, obviously. That's not how I am in general. I mean, most of you that generally watch my YouTube channel know that. I keep it pretty low tech just because that's how I want it, and it lets me just kind of focus on the subject at hand and not have to worry about extraneous details. Obviously, I don't want to put out a crappy product, and everything. I don't have like a big mixer or good microphones or anything like that. I'm just using a basic microphone, but I think it sounds good enough for what I'm trying to do. But who knows? Maybe in the future we'll expand a little bit. I don't know. But yeah, my goal was I was just going to put the audio up with the movie poster, which I actually thought that would be cool if I just put the poster up. Because I always like those old posters where they're hand drawn, which I did for the last one. I think actually that should be good enough, just for the podcast. But then the program that I normally use to make my stuff, I forgot that they changed to a paid program, and I don't want to pay any money. And then I'm just trying to figure it out. So I don't know. I'm just kind of venting, but a little more difficult just to put. You can't just put up audio on YouTube, which actually is kind of annoying. You think they would have a built-in podcast sort of thing where they can put a picture on there. If they can, please let me know. That would solve a lot of my problems. I just need something very, very basic. But anyways, with that out of the way, let's get into A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. And, I said in the last one, I absolutely loved the first Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, I only just saw it this past weekend, so it is still very fresh, and you got to keep that in mind. And if you are coming in to watch this one and you haven't watched the first one, I had mentioned that I've never seen these films before, and there's a lot of reasons why. I talk about that in the first episode, but very fresh perspective, especially as someone who's as big a horror fan as me. And this movie often gets listed as like the worst in the series or one of the worst. I've noticed that a lot from reading things and watching videos on it and all that kind of stuff. I generally see this one listed as one of the least favorites. And, I've only seen 3 and I haven't seen the others, so of course my opinion could change, but I thought this was a pretty good movie. It wasn't as good as the first one, and it did have a lot of issues in it, and I'll talk about all that. But it was good, though. I mean, it was very entertaining. I thought it was well shot. It had great music. It had great acting. It had great special effects. So like on paper, it's excellent. It had a couple weird things going on, which is why I didn't enjoy it as much, but I don't know, man. I really enjoyed this movie. I was never bored watching it. I never was like, so taken out of it, like, oh, this is so lesser than the previous one, that it was like distracting. So I really did enjoy this movie. It's definitely going to be one that I watch like every Halloween season. Or hell, I'm probably going to watch it all year round. I watch horror movies all year. Halloween is just, where it gets kicked into high gear. So I do got my cheat sheet again, like I told you last time, because even though I just watched this, I have a short-term attention. My short-term memory is like terrible, so I do have to like look at names and kind of stuff like that. And again, like I might miss a couple things here or there. Don't worry too much, because we can always chat about that in comments and stuff. So, one second here. So this movie takes place 5 years after the last one, and I kind of explained in the last one how the ending. I don't actually know if I talked about this in the last one, so let's actually backtrack a little bit, if we will, which we can because it's my podcast. But the ending of the first film is actually different than what's in the script. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. I heard somebody knocking at my door, and so of course, I'm talking about Freddy Krueger. I thought I was going to be killed. So anyways, the original film, the ending is actually different in the script than it was in the film. In the film, the four of them, they're in the car, and then the door locks, and the top comes on the convertible, and it's striped like Freddy's sweater, and then the mom gets pulled through. In the actual script, I have a copy of the script. It shows Freddy in the driver's seat, and he gives like a creepy smile and everything. It's not very different, but it is, different enough. They actually include it in, if you can watch, I don't know, the Blu-ray set I watched had that in there. And that's actually different than the original ending that Wes Craven intended, even from the script, which is where he just wanted, as far as I know, he just wanted Nancy and her mom to kind of wake up from the event and then just kind of like her to go off to school, I think. Meaning it would be like a happy ending. Now, obviously, in the ending of the true movie, it's not a happy ending because, presumably if we're going by the rules of the movie, Nancy doesn't actually kill Freddy because that's still a dream. Her mother dies, and, we would presume that they all die too in that car, of course, right? It's left a little ambiguous, but not too much. It's a slight twist ending, and there's different ways to approach it and think about it, but I mean, the way that I definitely saw, I thought was the clearest, was that, that's a dream. Freddy kills you in your dreams, so she didn't actually wake up when she went under to try to kill Freddy. I thought that was kind of neat. And in this movie, they do say that the mother had died, I'm pretty sure. So, that kind of is continuing the plot. We don't really hear about Nancy too much. You hear about her a little bit, but so this actually takes place 5 years later, and a new family, the Walshes, move into the old house. And this movie only came out a year later, but it takes place 5 years later. So this movie is dealing with Jesse, who's played by Mark Patton, and he's kind of the basic gist of this film is that he's kind of like having dreams with Freddy in them, and Freddy is kind of like telling him to kill people for him. This movie has a very it's a little confusing at times, and I'm sure that I'm thinking way too much into it, and like some of my problems are probably a result of that. I don't think that this movie was intended to be as cerebral as I'm like thinking it is, but nonetheless it's still kind of fun to think about. But that also did kind of come into some of my qualms with the movie, so to speak, because that is the gist of the movie, is that Freddy is pretty much getting him to try to kill people. And, we kind of learn through the film that, he essentially is trying to get him to do this, and he needs his body as a host so that he can go into the real world. And he has a friend in this movie. Her name is Lisa, played by Kim Myers, who looks exactly like person whose name I can't remember, Meryl Streep, sorry. And I mean, like, like exactly like her. Actually, I think my friend told me that they only cast her because she looked just like her, which I wouldn't. I think that's probably true, and and I don't know. It's a this one's a bit weird to talk about. It's kind of a little bit all over the place at some points, but he's the main character for sure. But then she does come in later. She's definitely underutilized in the beginning of the movie, probably even the first half, because she's really just like his friend. She's like the secondary character that's there to offer support, and then she does get a bigger part later on. And I think one that actually read that originally she wasn't going to be in as much of the movie. It was going to be like 90% of him, and then they kind of changed it. I actually think Wes Craven was the one that was like suggested that they do that because it was too much of him. Although a lot of this movie just deals with him going through these kind of psychological effects, dealing with what Freddy is doing to him and making him do, and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. So, I think most would agree that the first film is a very type of psychological type of thriller. It is kind of a slasher movie in a sense where, you got a killer going around killing kids and stuff. But it's not really a traditional slasher, and I think it's more of like a psychological horror kind of film, like a much more, even really like a mystery film. I think I said that. It does have this mystery vibe, even though, you are pretty sure, I'm saying going in blind to this, we all know the deal by now, but you're pretty sure that it's Freddy doing everything, but you're also not, you're kind of trying to figure out who he is because we don't know yet. And, the character of Rod is being accused of this murder, and you're like, is it him? It's all this confusing kind of stuff. Just the way it's presented, rather. It's not actually that confusing. And this one, though, has more of that psychological thing because it's really like Jesse is like breaking down in this movie from these like psychological effects of what's happening to him and how he's trying to deal with that, and like of course nobody's going to possibly believe him and that kind of thing. And he has a lot of great freak out moments in this one too, and I have to say Mark Patton is really good in this movie, and that was one of the things, his performance, traditionally, it's very different. It's a main guy character. We always get the end girl character in these horror movies, but they flipped the script and went with a guy, and I don't know how it would have worked either way, but Mark is really good in this movie because the scenes where he's freaking out are really good. They're like, he is just, it's good. I mean, I really did feel like this guy was like losing his fucking mind in this movie. Awesome performance, and that performance alone was one of the main things where I was like, I can't see why people hate this movie as much as they do, because that performance is awesome. And I actually mentioned to my friend when I was watching this with him, I was just like, I'm like, you don't really get a lot of acting performances in horror movies like this a lot. And I mean, of course there are a lot of horror movies with fantastic performances, but I'm saying in general, when we watch our fun slashers and stuff, we don't watch it for the acting. But this guy's acting is really good in this. And actually, my friend knows Mark. So he reached out to him and told him that I said that. And Mark actually came back and said, oh, yeah, tell him thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. It was a really fun movie to work on. So that's really cool that Mark saw, heard that I said that and thanked me for that and everything. That was really cool, to indirectly hear from him. Awesome, right? Degrees of separation, So yeah, that was like the main thing where I was like, okay, I really like the aspect, that psychological aspect to this film. And so Jesse basically has, he has a coach, his gym coach, Coach Schneider, who's played by Marshall Bell, who I don't actually really know anything about, but he was perfectly fine in this movie. And anyways, so Coach Schneider is like the douchebag coach, very typical, right? And Jesse does get into a fight with one of these kids named Grady, and he makes them like run laps and shit like that and do push-ups and stuff, and they end up becoming friends, so he becomes like a tertiary character. And so that's part of that. And then eventually Lisa comes over, who I guess is his girlfriend. You're not quite sure until later on in the film, what's going on there. But they find Nancy's diary when they are cleaning out his room. and it's like explaining like how she's seeing Fred in her dream and how she's going crazy and everything like that. And so that's when Jesse's like, oh fuck, here it goes again. That typical thing where they're like, oh, I saw him too in my dream, how they had that in the first movie. So that's that kind of moment. And then a little things start happening here and there, like weird things, and then like there is like a pretty ridiculous scene where their pet parakeets like explode, and one of them comes out and is like running around, flying around the room, attacking them, and I'm pretty sure the bird explodes into this thing of feathers. And of course Jesse's dad will not believe him, and actually I think it was this scene actually where he literally like brings him into the kitchen, and he's like, you're trying to sabotage us, you did this on purpose. And it's just one of those things where, again, it's a cliche where like the parent never believes them, but it's like what the fuck do you think, he's a wizard or something? What do you think he just did? Like how was he responsible for that possibly? That scene was probably one of the weaker scenes, I think, because it was so, well, for sure it was unexpected for me, but it was so fucking ridiculous. Like the special effects there were kind of goofy, and just the whole, I don't know, the whole thing with the bird exploding and everything. I was like, okay, that was interesting. I actually think that, Wes Craven didn't direct this. I didn't even say this was directed by Jack Shoulder, who's done other horror movies. He did Alone in the Dark, I think, the original. So he's definitely got, horror experience and everything. I don't know if that one came out before or after, but regardless, Wes Craven was approached to do this, and, Wes was like, this script sucks, I'm not doing it. And they really wouldn't change much, like he did offer input, like I said. But I think they were kind of like, just, okay, well, you going to do it or no? No? Okay, well then we're doing it anyways. So they went ahead and did it, which, he had to expect that they were obviously going to make a sequel being as successful as the first one did. But I understand that movie kind of being like his baby in a way, where he's written these really good characters and this whole lore and everything, and they're kind of like changing things and being like, what the fuck, you're going to fuck my movie up. I don't want you to do that. So I totally understand why he didn't do it, but I know he did give some input, which was good, and the input he gave was pretty good. And we'll get into the things I didn't like and how it's different and everything. So I'm trying to think of some notable scenes. So he's getting these dreams, which are getting kind of crazy and everything. And this, one of the scenes I didn't quite remember. I didn't remember if he was sleepwalking, dreaming, or if he like got in a fight with his parents and ran out of the house. But he goes to a gay bar, which a lot of people have mentioned that this film has a lot of like gay undertones to it, like homosexual sort of imagery or like subtext or things like that. And because he goes to a gay bar and he gets caught there by Coach Schneider, who's there and everything, and he makes him go back to the school and like run laps in the gym and everything like that, or whatever. And it's just it was just interesting. I mean, it'd be hard to disagree that there isn't. It's pretty obvious. It's not like they were hiding it or anything like that. I'm not sure what they were trying to say, perhaps, but it's definitely there. And I do know that was a big point of contention. Obviously, this came out in '85, so that was a touchy subject back then, unfortunately, but it was. And Mark Patton is gay, but he was closeted, I think, at the time. I mean, please, if you all know, please correct me if I'm wrong, but so I think he mentioned that they were like continually inserting more and more of this like weird like homoerotic sort of subtext into it, and it was like making him uncomfortable that they were doing that so much because he was closeted at the time. That's about the extent of that I know, so I don't really want to say any more, but I do know that gets brought up often. So that's basically what I had to say about that part. Now, this next scene is cool to me. I thought this was cool, where he goes back to the school, and then Coach Schneider goes back, and all of the like soccer balls and basketballs and shit start popping out of the walls and hitting him in his office, and like you see like the tennis ball, whatever you call them, the little tubes that the tennis balls come in that look like Pringle tubes, start popping out like gas cannons at him and everything, and obviously it's Freddy. Now this scene was definitely cool. Like obviously nothing like particularly gory here, but I'm a sucker for practical effects, and even though this was kind of like, you could almost say hokey in a sense, I really like practical effects, man. I really do. I thought this was really cool. And before we get on a little further, though, this is a great part to explain some of the things I didn't quite like, and that I think a lot of other people have issues with this one as well. Is that, what's the problem here? Well, the problem is that Freddy is doing things in the real world, which, going by the last movie's mythos, if you will, that's just what I'm going to call it, mythos. He's not really able to do that. He does everything within the dream. I mean, that was the whole point of the first movie, is that he can only kill you or harm you in the dream, so you better not fucking fall asleep. And then you can pull him out to harm him. But in this movie, you do see it a few times, the parakeets and things like that. He's manifesting himself in ways in the real world by the parakeets, all the sports equipment coming out and attacking the coach, and then the jump ropes come out and hang him by the neck and pull him into the shower where he gets hung up on the shower. That's pretty much in full swing. And it's like, if you're going to watch this, you just kind of have to accept that they went a different route. And I'm a little split on it, probably leaning more towards I don't quite like it. I just, part of what I think we all agree makes Freddy scary is that he is in your dreams. It's like the one place you always think you're safe. You're not safe there with this guy. He's going to get you there. And so bringing him in, at least in an extent, into the real world takes, I think, a part of that fear away, that part of the scary factor. Yeah, I guess they wanted Freddy Krueger to be running around, like, killing people, mass quantities of people and everything, which we'll get to that. But that, to me, that's not scary. I think to a lot of people that's not particularly scary either. So, yeah, they kind of flipped the mythos on its head. They took away the fact that he could, only get you in your dream. He's doing things in the real world. He comes out of the real world at certain points in this movie. And the whole plot of this is that he's basically possessing Jesse, using him basically like as a conduit, so he can get his body out in the real world and wreak havoc. I didn't really care for that. It didn't make the movie terrible. Like, again, I need to reiterate, I really thought this was a fun, fairly well-made movie. But that wasn't great, Okay, but, on the flip side, you think about it like this, though. This was the second movie, And again, like with all these, it's very easy to look at them with a critical eye, having them for nearly 40 years now, right? We've been able to watch. I mean, this movie is like 35 years old. We've had it for years to watch and analyze, and all of the other ones as well. But this was the second movie. I mean, this came out a year after. So on one hand, they did have a pretty freaking well-defined set of rules and kind of a lore built up, so to speak. Obviously the first movie wasn't particularly like long, and it wasn't like a real dense film, but Wes Craven did a really good job at setting these kind of rules and things in place, and they kind of flipped that on its head, like I said. But I know I'm reiterating myself, but it's the second movie, so maybe they tried to do something different. And Wes Craven certainly didn't like that, right? That's why he didn't do this. He did not like the script. I'm sure that he did not like that idea. But they were trying to do something different. Maybe they didn't quite hit the mark on it. But I can't always, I kind of have a soft spot when people try something different. It's like, if you're going to try something and go 100%, I can kind of respect that, even if it doesn't work out so well. Because it's always good to try to reinvent things. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. You know what I mean? It's not like this was the fifth movie, and there were 4 movies of a very solid, defined set of rules and everything with this kind of plot and story and everything. And then they said, oh no, Freddy can come out in the real world and kill people. I mean, maybe he does that in the other ones. I haven't seen them, but you know what I mean? That's kind of the thing. So I think they were just trying to do something different. I think they were trying to keep things fresh or try a new spin on the story or something, and it wasn't quite what people were looking for or things like that. But that's kind of how I felt. Now we get to the scene when Schneider's dragged into the showers and hung up, and this quite honestly was like a little strange because it was like very clearly like some sort of subtext here, like he gets his pants ripped down and they show his ass and he's getting like spanked on his ass. It's like this weird sadomasochism thing, and it's like I was thinking about it in terms of Freddy. Like Freddy is very sadistic, even 2 movies in, he's very sadistic. Actually, someone in my comments mentioned that it was a great comment how like Freddy at least in the first film like clearly is enjoying tormenting these people. So even this early on in the series, it's been pretty well established, I think, that this guy is really fucked up. Like he is really enjoying doing it. He killed kids. Like he didn't learn his lesson. He loves doing this to people. So I kind of looked at it from that angle. Like then I was like, it's definitely a gay subtext thing. Like, the guy was at the gay bar, and I think he was like dressed in leather and everything. And, he's like punishing him for being gay. I'm not sure what they were going for there, but it was kind of, regardless of what the fuck the subtext was there, it was kind of an awesome scene. Like seeing this guy getting whipped in the ass with these like marks coming on him from nowhere. I always love when like they show Freddy's like marks come out of nowhere. I always like those kinds of effects. And then, it starts to get a little dreamy here, where like kind of like the first movie, but in a bit more of a confusing way, where like I'm not actually quite sure what's going on. Like they show Jesse kind of just stand there and stare at him, and it's like, what are you in shock or are you doing this? And like, what the fuck? Why aren't you doing anything? He kind of just stands there, and then later, he has the glove, so it's like he did it, and it's like then it starts this whole thing where it's like we know that he's being possessed by Freddy, and Freddy's asking him to kill people. So it's like, is he possessed by Freddy? Is it Freddy doing it, or is it Jesse like under control, kind of doing these things? It started to get a little fuzzy to me if what was the case. Like maybe I was reading it wrong, like that's entirely possible, but that's what it seemed like to me. So, so anyways, there's a scene where Lisa takes Jesse to this like abandoned factory where Freddy Krueger apparently used to work, and they don't really find anything, but like I think they find like a rat. They like open the boiler and there's a rat in there, like just a little jump scare, nothing like a very typical jump scare where it spooks you, but it's really nothing. And then like Lisa like freaks out over it and starts crying. I thought that was kind of funny. Like she's getting consoled by Jesse. I thought that was funny. 1 second, folks. Sorry, I needed a little sip of water. So then we get to this little pool party scene, and this was definitely my favorite scene in the whole movie, even though it definitely went full force with this weird Freddy in real life thing. But I can't deny the scene was awesome. It was awesome. So I'm going to take a quick break, and we're going to talk about it. I hope you're enjoying this. Please like this video if you like it. And, the most important thing to me is that you comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts and everything. Again, that's why I do this. So I'm going to take a real quick break, which, again, will seem like 5 seconds to you, and we'll be right back. Okay. Hope everybody is enjoying this so far. Grab a adult beverage if you wish. I have one, or whatever strikes your fancy, and let's continue. So Jesse goes to this pool party with Lisa because Lisa's like loaded. They show a shot of her in her pool earlier on in the movie. She's loaded, and he's making out with her. We got some serious heavy petting thing going on with her, and I've like, my memory is bad, right? Like I just saw this. Something weird happens, like his tongue starts getting like long or weird or something, and he freaks out and he leaves. So he goes to Ron's house, and then there he's like, it's kind of like in the first movie. That's what I was seeing it as, kind of a throwback where, he tells Ron like, hey man, I'm gonna like fall asleep, and if you start seeing anything weird, wake me up. And so Ron's like, yeah man, sure. And as soon as he said that, I'm like, okay, well obviously Ron's gonna fucking fall asleep, as is the case in these movies, and he does. And then or no, you know what happens? He falls asleep. Jesse does. Sorry, I'm bad with. And then he starts freaking out. So Ron's like, "Oh shit, what's going on?" And then you start to see Freddy like push through his stomach, and then we get an awesome special effect where like his chest bursts open and like Freddy walks out of his stomach. It's an awesome effect. It's super gory. Great practical effects, of course. Probably the coolest effect in the movie, I think. And then he murders the fool. I mean, he like stabs him right through the chest into the wall, and then his parents come in and like freak out. And and you know, Jesse like sees Freddy in the mirror and he crashes the mirror and everything. His parents don't catch him though. So then we get to where he comes back and he tells Lisa that, you know, like he killed Ron, and he's starting to freak out, and she's like very supportive, but like a little like unrealistically supportive because he's covered in blood. He like walks in her house freaking the fuck out like he has been this whole movie, just covered in blood, and is like, "Oh, I just killed Ron." And she's like, you know, she's freaked out, but you know what I mean? Like, I would have been like, "Holy shit." So then they get into this little skirmish, and Freddy pops out. Freddy basically takes control. Freddy gets put in the real world, and then they get into a skirmish, and she's trying to pull Jesse back into it, but then that's when Freddy comes out to the party, and we get into this fight. Now, this was where I was a little bit confused, and again, I'm probably looking too much into it. That's probably the case. Or I could be missing something. Like I said, my short-term memory is not very good. I kind of have to watch movies 2 times in order to like fully get it when I'm going to do things like this. But regardless, he comes out and he starts fucking annihilating everybody at this pool party. Like, the walls, the gates start being lit on fire so they can't leave. The pool is like boiling water, and it's like this whirlpool, and people are getting sucked into it. It's this mass chaos. It's awesome. But here I was like, are they seeing Freddy or are they seeing Ron? Because I think what the movie intended was that they were seeing Freddy. That's what I think the intention was. That like Freddy successfully pulled himself through his host into the real world to unleash some hell. But the way that like one of the guys is like, "Hey buddy, it's okay, don't worry." Yeah, I guess he was talking to Freddy, but then I almost took it as like he was talking to Jesse. And I think it would have been a lot cooler, honestly, if it was the case where like he was just losing his mind the whole time. I don't know how that probably wouldn't have gone too well with audiences. I get it, because they want to see Freddy. And also, you know, then it would be a little bit less of a Nightmare on Elm Street movie and more like a true like psychological movie. But I thought that would have been awesome if that really was the case, that this guy was not killing with Freddy. Like, it was just him like losing his fucking mind. And I don't think I'm probably the only person with that opinion. I'm sure there's plenty of message boards and stuff on Reddit of people having quite heated arguments over that point. But that's what I was starting to get a little confused over. But I think that it was their intention that Freddy comes out, which of course we want to see Freddy annihilate this party, but it's also like a little on the nose, and I don't know, it came off a little hokey to me. But at least, you know, we get to see some killings, which is why we're here, right? Some good old-fashioned murder. And Freddy is just like slicing people. He like stabs a guy right through the chest. And then, okay, so and here's where like a little bit of that humor starts to come back in, is where probably the funniest thing in the movie. I don't quite remember the line, but the guy that's like trying to calm him down, who's like, "Hey man, it's cool. Like we're good. We can help you." Freddy says something and then calls him a fucker, and then like hits him with his claw and sends the dude flying like 30 feet into a grill where he gets burned. I kind of laughed out loud, which surely was the intention, and that was awesome. So then her dad comes out with a shotgun and everything, but she won't let him kill Freddy because she thinks he's, you know, of course, Jesse, which like I think he is. He's kind of stuck in there. So then they go to the factory and we get into a little cat and mouse kind of chase, very much like in the first movie where she's kind of going around the boiler room and kind of like, Freddy's, you see like creeping like his glove or something. And yeah, the boiler room set that they used for this one was good too. I didn't have a problem. Although I gotta say, I'd mentioned in the first movie the moment I realized this movie is like on a different level was that boiler room set, because there was this like scene where Nancy went through a claustrophobic hallway, and I was like, yeah, they really are thinking of everything to like really set that mood, and that claustrophobia is what makes it. Like, it's dark and dingy and scary, but the fact that you don't have really any wiggle room and this guy's down there with you is really creepy. And the set that they used in this one for the boiler room, which I don't know what they used, it could have been a factory. They most likely, with a bigger budget, used, a set, but it was much more open. It did have verticality to it, which I actually thought was really cool. So you almost had this MC Escher style sort of like aspect to it where it's like very labyrinthian and everything like that. But it was much more open. So that killed a little bit of that, love I had for that first time I saw that scene in the previous film. But it was still a great set, and it lit really well. And actually, I sometimes I say my thoughts out loud when I'm watching a movie. The lighting, I mentioned it right out loud to my friend. I'm like, oh, red and green, because the lighting was red and green. It was, on the nose for sure, but like I love that stuff. That like little symbolism that just adds that extra touch to the scene. Really love that. And then Freddy comes out, and we get to see Robert Englund, who is, I don't know, like I dare say like underused in this film, but you definitely see him more than the first one. You really, like I said, you don't really see Freddy that much in the first movie, and he's always in the dark, and he still is kind of in the dark in this one. You do see his face more in the light, like when he's fighting with Lisa in her house, and then during the party. But it's still, it's not like as extreme perhaps as some of the later ones, at least from what I know. And so you get to see him here, Robert Englund, who, I can't not talk about him because he's great. And Robert Englund is just as good in this one as he was in the last one. He's just a great actor. And then we get into a little bit of a weird, but kind of cliched kind of deal. Like, she saves him basically through the power of love, She says she loves him, and she kisses Freddy, which is fucking disgusting, but, that's what they wanted you to feel. It's not supposed to be pretty. And then Freddy just basically kind of like, I think he just like explodes into ash or something, and Jesse like explodes out of his chest, So that's basically the movie. Now, I didn't mention in the beginning, there's this whole like dream sequence where these kids are on the bus, and the bus driver is like freaking out and like then becomes Freddy, and they get stuck on this like fucking bizarre like nightmare-scape like chasm thing. And, Robert Englund plays the bus driver, too. Looking pretty sharp in this movie, too. And this is how the end of the movie is. Everything's good. They're on the school bus. Although you don't see Ron, because, Ron's fucking dead now. And then, he starts to, like, oh, shit, this is just like my dream. And they're like, no, it's fine. And then Freddy bursts his arm through this chick's chest and kills her. And then they just drive off into the field, just like at the beginning of the movie. Now, this was like, kind of, to me, I was like, all of these horror movies have that little, like, almost like a one-liner ending, that little twist ending. It might not even make sense, but they always put it in there. But I was like, how long after the previous scene did this take place? Like, Ron got horribly murdered. Like, they're not going to investigate Jesse. He was just there. Like, what's going on here? Everything's cool. Like, these kids are fine. They just went through a super traumatic thing. What about all the kids that died at the party? Like, there were kids burned alive. Kids were, like, had their, like, fucking faces torn off and, like, all this stuff. And so I was like, well, that seems like a pretty big plot hole to me. But I don't think the filmmakers thought too much about that. Oh, boy. So that was basically the movie. I've talked a lot about the plot in this one. I don't like that aspect. I think I've made that very clear. But I appreciate that they went for a more psychological route. It didn't totally hit the mark. Like, it wasn't nearly as good as the first one. But I can't say I dislike this. And like I said at the beginning, I'm probably going to watch this movie every single year because it was totally fun. I mean, I like I said, I never was bored. I had a lot of fun. I had great kills and special effects. And I had great music too, which I didn't talk about that. Now, the music was a negative in a way. Now, the music, I don't even remember who did it. Let me check. Music by Christopher Young. I've never actually heard of that composer. But, oh, okay, it says he's done Hellraiser, The Grudge, Drag Me to Hell, Sinister. Oh, okay, I'm reading this live, by the way, if you couldn't tell. Spider-Man 3. Oh, Sinister has a great score. Okay, so this guy actually knows what he's doing. I mean, the music was fantastic. And that was another thing is that, the original music by Charles Bernstein is all synth, and it sets the atmosphere and tone perfectly for that movie. I couldn't have it any other way. I mean, and like I said, I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. This movie, probably because they had a bigger budget, that was what necessitated the synth in the first movie. They had a bigger budget, so they probably said, we can hire an orchestra to do the music. So the style of music is totally different. And I think it does, for most people, they're not going to care, right? Most people don't really ever care about that stuff. But as a musician, obviously I care immensely. And I think it was detracted from the film, in my opinion, because that synth style of music adds to the atmosphere so much. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a video on YouTube, probably, of somebody who put the synth score from the first one into the second one for certain scenes. A lot of people like to do stuff like that. I would be curious to see how that feels, or I don't know. But I will say, despite the fact that I was disappointed that we didn't have that style of music, the score is really good. Now, I wouldn't say there's like anything so notable that I was like, wow, I got to go listen to that. Like the first one, I was listening to the soundtrack, but it was very well done. And it's like, it's old school 80s. Like it was a really well done, beautifully orchestrated horror score. And you don't get shit like that nowadays. I don't think. I'm a little cynical about like movie scores now, but I don't think they're very good anymore. I think they're very formulaic, So yeah, it's a good classic score, and that's what I'll say about that. One other thing I wanted to say before I left was something I read that I found very interesting, which I thought somebody said, and I'm like, no way. And then I looked it up, and it actually was true. Is New Line was like, well, we're going to save money, and we're going to just put a dude in a rubber mask to play Freddy. I'm like, I don't know how big Robert Englund was back then. I know he was a well-respected actor. But I'm like, did you not see how good of a performance that guy gave in the last movie, and you're not going to cast him? But they're always trying to save money. So they actually did cast a dude in a rubber mask to play Freddy, and they shot scenes with him. And then when they realized that the guy that they put in as that actor was really short, and did not have the chops that Robert Englund has, they were like, okay, that's not going to work because it looked weird. And like, also there were, the scenes where like he's kind of fighting all these kids and everything at the party. They were like, it kind of looks goofy because he's too short. So they put Robert Englund in, which that would have been a horrific mistake if they didn't hire him back. But I guess there's one scene, and honestly, I didn't even notice it. It's the scene where Coach Schneider gets killed in the shower. That's a scene left in from the stunt guy that they brought in who has a rubber mask on. So it's still in the movie, but I guess you can't see it that well because there's a lot of steam, it says. I'm reading this little blip. So that's probably why I didn't notice it, but it's interesting that a little piece of that is still left in the movie. That would have been a mistake, dude. So yeah, and special effects wise, like I said, they were all really, really good. Different special effects artists, I think, from the first movie. I'm pretty sure, actually. But they were great. And they didn't use the original guy because I guess he was busy. But, and they did adjust Freddy's makeup a little bit. Not enough to where I was, like, taken aback by how different it was. But I do think that they do change his design a little bit for each movie. I mean, I know New Nightmare, it's a completely different design because it's supposed to be something different, and I think that his design in that movie is awesome, but like I said, I haven't seen much of that, and we'll get there in due time. So this was Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, or A Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy's Revenge, or A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Electric Boogaloo, whatever you want to call it. I really actually like this movie, despite what some people say about it. It was really fun. I didn't like it as much as 1 or 3, but it was a great movie. If you haven't seen it, obviously watch the first one first, but yeah, it's great if you like horror. Although I'm sure most of you have probably seen it. I'm probably like the last person on the planet to say it. So anyways, yeah, this was that, man. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, let me know what your thoughts are and all that kind of stuff. I like hearing from you. The next one will be on part 3, Dream Warriors. That'll be a fun one to do. I got a lot to say. And that's basically it. Everybody, hope you're all watching good movies and staying scared.